Ferrari are off to one of their worst starts of the season, and with Aston Martin and Mercedes expecting to improve their performance from Imola onwards, the Maranello team will have a lot on its mind in the recent period. However, according to a former F1 driver and an expert, the issue is not the car, but the drivers themselves. So could it be that Ferrari is struggling because they don't have the right lineup to deliver the results from the SF23? The Maranello team brought Sainz in as a replacement for Sebastian Vettel from 2021 onwards, and while the Spaniard was able to outperform Leclerc in his first season with the team, 2022 has shown who the real leader in the team is. Nonetheless, the 2023 season saw yet another shake-up between these two drivers, and it seems like they're constantly changing the competitiveness between them, with Sainz ready to step up as the team's leader. But what's essentially wrong with Ferrari is the fact they're not able to deliver the results that everybody else expects them to do, for a variety of reasons. One of the main issues that the car has was its reliability, and in 2023, Sainz called out the team for moving in the wrong development direction, saying they needed to change the aerodynamic design of the car if they wanted to see themselves challenging Red Bull and the rest of the pack for wins. After being publicly denied by Vasseur, a critical question has arisen. Is the problem in the drivers and not in the SF23 itself? We'll get to that later in this video, and before we do that, we want to talk about the results that Ferrari had in 2023. So far, they managed to get one podium, and in the Constructors' Championship, they sit in 4th place behind Red Bull, Aston Martin and Mercedes. For things to be worse, Vasseur has bragged about bringing a massive upgrade package to Miami, only for his drivers to be outperformed by both Mercedes drivers respectively and Alonso as well. Now, if you think about it, Leclerc did make a fatal mistake that cost him a potential first row start and did ruin his and many other drivers' qualifying sessions, which only goes to show that he lacks what a championship contender desperately needs: the fighting spirit and the ability to not make mistakes in crucial times. When talking about his blunders, the Monegasque went on to add, "More than the track, I think what's unacceptable is doing twice the same mistake in the same corner. I'm really disappointed with myself. You can always find excuses in those situations. The wind was really strong, it was really tricky, the setup of the car was really tricky also, but I put myself in this condition. I wanted this setup and I knew it would be tricky, but I thought I'd be able to extract the maximum out of the car in Q3, which is normally one of my strong points. Very disappointed with myself. I did the same mistake yesterday and this shouldn't happen." So what can we draw as a conclusion from his statement by Leclerc? He isn't shy when it comes to being harsh on himself, that's true, and that's for applause. However, you cannot go and make the same mistakes over and over again and talk about how it's all your fault and you're the one to blame. You don't get to become the champion with a mentality like this. More precisely, you cannot compete with a driver like Verstappen when he's driving the wheels out of the car and isn't leaving any margin for mistake, while you're sending the car into the walls on a regular push in the qualifying sessions. If you look at what Verstappen's been doing with Red Bull, even in 2021, when his car was very close in competition with Mercedes, then you cannot help but note the massive difference there is between these two drivers in terms of mental sharpness. Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso and other proven champions have never folded under pressure and have always delivered what's been expected of them. That, unfortunately, isn't the case with Leclerc, which is why Ralf Schumacher went on to talk about how the car in Ferrari isn't the number one problem, but the drivers are. When talking about this issue with Ferrari, Ralf went on to add, "The car isn't great, but it's better than they say. Sainz missed brakes at the pit entrance, while the other hardly finishes a fast lap without crashing. Frank Williams would have clipped me round the ears. The trend just isn't good. Ferrari once again fell short of expectations. Ferrari has given me a very decent impression since Frédéric Vasseur took office. A lot has happened there. I see the biggest problem with the drivers. For me, Leclerc and Sainz aren't consistent enough." Now, what seems to be the main issue that has triggered these statements from Ralf Schumacher? When Leclerc did what he did in Miami, more precisely, when he set up the car on his own despite being given a different opinion by his engineers, that's what cost him the crash and the failure throughout the entire race weekend. Obviously, Leclerc took full responsibility for that, but it just goes to show that the driver itself has no idea how the car should be run during a GP like this one. Obviously, it's something that can bother and affect you in the long term, and the motivation that you need to have when fighting drivers like Verstappen is going to be brought even lower with the recent dominance of Red Bull. A lot has been changing at Ferrari, starting from their team principal up to their race director, who will leave the team at the end of the year, and while many of these changes have been facilitated by Leclerc himself, it seems like he fails to live under pressure. Sainz does give the impression of being the more composed driver, and he's been the one bringing more points to Ferrari than Leclerc. True, he did suffer from that penalty in Australia, which was totally his fault, and in Miami, while being passed by Russell, he did finish higher than Leclerc. Nonetheless, the pace of the SF23 has been looking a bit worrisome, and while we're expecting to see improvements from Imola onwards, it's definitely not the picture that Ferrari and their fans would want to witness at this moment. That's something that Schumacher believes as well, as he went on to add, Leclerc himself has said that against the advice of his engineers, he mistuned the car. With his mistakes, he shows that he either doesn't have the maturity yet, or maybe at the end of the day he's not consistently good to drive a world championship for Ferrari. At the moment, this isn't the case. Last year we saw that Sainz was able to call his own shots, and usually they turned in his favour, such as in Monaco and Silverstone. However, he's been far from consistent this year, and the fact that he was 8/10 slower than Leclerc in Baku goes on to show that he's far from taking the leadership role in Ferrari. Something he could have easily capitalised on, given the fact that Leclerc was struggling a lot with the SF23 in the recent races. When talking about this matter, Schumacher has pointed out that Sainz wasn't a driver that needs to be praised either, as he went on to add, Sainz was 8/10 away from Leclerc on a weekend. In Miami he was at his level, slows down and drives into the pit lane too fast. To be honest, the Ferrari team is currently doing a better job than both drivers. In a time where Ferrari was expected to be at least the designated number 2 team after a strong 2022 showing, it's safe to say that they disappointed both their fans and their drivers, but it may not be all the team's fault. Yes, the aerodynamic concept does need to be changed, but apart from that, the drivers need to take more responsibility for the result, and dropping from P2 to P4 in the Constructors' Championship while heading into the new season with a new team principal only goes to show that there is a certain imbalance that needs to be fixed as soon as possible if Ferrari wants to be competitive yet again. Leclerc, for one, has said that although he recognises the mistakes of his own driving, he doesn't plan to change his style, which only goes to show that maybe he's not ready to accept the fact that the issue lies with him. Nonetheless, this is something that would scream good news in the ears of Red Bull, Aston Martin and Mercedes, and with every race weekend passing by, Ferrari's managing to make themselves look like an outsider team. Obviously, it would delight us if we saw a proper battle between Ferrari and Red Bull, but as of now, I don't see any improvements coming from the Maranello team that would have the potential to push Red Bull out of the top spot or even challenge Mercedes and Aston Martin for the second place in the Constructors' Championship. So, what do you think about Schumacher's statement on Leclerc and Sainz? Let us know in the comments down below.